Hi, thank you for joining me. God's put some things on my heart for the last few weeks that I believe that He's wanting me to share. I'm going to talk about my testimony, and I've shared this several times in our church, in other gatherings that I've been a part of over the years, but I've really never gone into as much detail as I believe that God wants me to go into today, because there's a limited time to visit about this, to talk about this. And so God's just put it on my heart to share. And, this is not to share, to say how hard I had it, for eyes to be on me, because that's not my desire. My desire is to share what God's done in my life and for Him to get the glory. And for others that are struggling with depression, with major mental issues in their life, or just other things, to know that God can bring you out of those things too. It's a story of hope, of when we don't give up, seeing the faithfulness of God. And there may be some people listening today that you're ready to give up, and you need to be sure to stay and listen to this, and because that's where I was at in my life. But you know what? God is faithful, and so I want to share His faithfulness in my life, and talk about my story. And so we're going to go into that today, and I hope that this blesses you. You may know of somebody that struggles with this, and it might be something that you can share with those people, because even in the church, you don't see a whole lot of people coming out of depression, and in the place that I was in life. You don't see, I mean, you see victory, you do, but it's not an everyday occurrence, even in the church. But there's some truth that God's taught me going through what I've gone through, that I want to share today. And just I want this to be a blessing. And so I grew up in West Texas in the 70s and 80s. I grew up in a home where I had a mom and dad that worked very hard. We worked very hard as a family. Worked on a farm, and at the age of 5 years old, my brothers and I were already out helping mom and dad do things around the home, and take care of the animals that we had. And so mom and dad I grew up in a good family, a well-respected family, but I did not grow up going to church. I did not grow up having a strong relationship with the Lord. I was introduced to Jesus, at an age probably of 8 or 9 years old. And I remember even accepting Jesus into my heart, and accepting that relationship with Him at an early age. But as many of you know, that when you're not reading the Word of God, or not spending time with that, and you step away from that from any period of time, that truth that we have, when we step away from that, it seems like we lose it. The world gets a grip on our lives, and that's what happened. My parents didn't agree about the church that we would go to or where we would go, so we just didn't really go as a family, very seldom. And so I grew up in a moral family. I grew up in a good family, but there was this truth that we didn't have, that I didn't have, that I have now, that have helped me so much, that we just didn't have access to during that time. Mom and dad did the best they knew how to do, and I have great parents. I'm thankful for the parents that God gave me, because they've been instrumental in bringing me out and helping me through the years get my life on track. But as I grew up with a tremendous amount of anxiety in my life, fear and anxiety. Anytime I would leave home or go to someone else's house to spend the night, and I didn't have a whole lot of those opportunities, but when I did, I would get very ill, throwing up. It was just nervousness, anxiety attacks, and I would end up having to come home and be at home. Anytime we went away, I went away from home. Tremendous stomach problems, just nerves, and a lot of you that have that understand the problems that you can have with your stomach. I drank Milana at the time, and it was just it's like milk and magnesia. Back in those days, that's what we had in the 80s, is just these drinks that to help with to coat your stomach, to help in those situations. So I drink so much of these products, and as I got older, it seemed like the anxiety got worse. As a senior in high school, I started playing sports, and when we would leave to go on our away games, I would just I would just, the anxiety would get so rough on me that, I would play the football games, but I wasn't eating. So I went off food for several days, lost a lot of weight. That entailed us going to the doctor, doing an upper GI scope, and the doctor coming out and saying, telling my mom that my stomach looked like one huge ulcer. And I remember the doctor asking my mom, "Do you think Todd is depressed?" And we didn't know what depression was. And she said no, and I said, "That's not right. I don't have depression." But what I would see, nothing really ever happened. I wasn't on any medication. Back in those days, I worked. I lived in a family that worked very hard, and we just, when something was wrong, we just worked our way through it. We just put our head down through determination, and there's a lot of things we can do through determination. But that's how I lived my life. I just walked through it the best I could. And as I would go to college, and you get away from home, the things that are hidden come out. And I would spend a lot of time in my room drinking, a lot of time alone as much as I could, because that was my safe place. I felt like I had control in that situation. Well, what was happening is my life was just passing by. I was watching others experience life, but because of the anxiety and the issues I had, I that's just where I was at. I did go out. I did go out and do things with other people. I was social, but there would just be times that it would be, there would be periods of time that I just didn't want to be around anybody. And I didn't understand that. I was always a good student in high school. And when I got in college, I worked hard and I was a good student there. I transferred back to Lubbock to Texas Tech University and started living with my brother. Well, you know, I got into a lot of bad habits about not going to class, not taking care of my responsibility. We both did, and I flunked out of school, and was drinking a lot. I was partying a lot, and I just it was getting harder on me. It was getting so much harder all the time to go out socially, to be a part of things. And I just kept withdrawing. Like I said, I would stay in my apartment, stay away from people. I went to, I did go to class some. I worked, but my life, the quality of life just continued going down. I finally decided I had to buckle down in school, or I wasn't going to be in school any longer. And when I started trying to work hard, I couldn't make my grades. I started failing tests. Mentally, I was in a bad place. Um, Started going to seeing a Christian counselor, and talking about my problems. It helps. It helps when we talk about things, but you know, it wasn't a long term help. It just was a relief for a short time, and then I would continue struggling. But I was going to counselor, got back into college because I said, well, I had depression. I was diagnosed with depression, and got on different medications. But I continued to slide. I still could not make my grades. I'd always mentally, in as far as working hard, I could always push through. If I worked hard enough, things didn't come easy to me, but if I worked hard enough, I could usually do pretty well. But it seemed like that even that was being taken from me. I couldn't even, when I worked hard, I couldn't make my grades. And there was a pride in that. And when that is taken away from me, you start having a lot of self rejection because, see, you start seeing friends of yours moving out of college, getting jobs, getting married, and having personal lives. And then I even had brothers that were graduating high school, getting married, getting jobs, getting out. And here I was stuck in a place that I didn't know how to get out of. And like I said, I was diagnosed with depression and would go on medication. I would go on Effexor, Paxil. Um, I would go on many different types, and also go into a psychologist. Um, I did counseling once a week, and worked, tried to work hard and do what I was supposed to do, but I just continued in that spiral, and then during that time, I moved home, and that's hard for someone who's in their 20s, who wants to be out, who sees other family members, um, my brothers, my siblings out in life, and they're moving forward, and I felt like I was moving backwards. And so that was real hard. There's a lot of self rejection that goes on during that time of my life, and it was just a really, really difficult time. I wasn't sleeping at night. If I slept 1 to 2 hours a night, I was very fortunate. I started taking Ambien. And Ambien at the time, they didn't. It's a sleeping pill. It wasn't habit forming, but the truth of the matter is from my point of view, it was very habit forming. And anytime I saw something that was that habit forming, I just didn't want any part of it. So I just took myself off of it, and I just gritted through life. The medications were not working. I kept getting switched over. I was finally diagnosed bipolar. During this time, I was still working. I was still working jobs, doing what I could to pay the bills, because the bills were adding up, the monthly bills, because of the amount of medication I was on and the cost of those things. I was spending right around $1,000 a month just for my counseling, psychiatrist, and my medications. I didn't have any insurance at the time, and so I was diagnosed bipolar, and I went on medications like Depakote, which made me very ill. I got on lithium, and I've just recently figured out why they probably put me on lithium. And lithium was for, they thought at the time, to help with suicide. And I was suicidal all the time because my life was just going backwards. I compared myself constantly to others, and which is a pitfall when we start doing that, you know. And so the spiral just continued. the spiral continued. The medication didn't really help a whole lot. I got on a antidepressant called Surzone. It helped me sleep some, which made it better. But the heaviness and this depression was on me constantly. I used to have, you know, bad days, bad few days, and it got to the point where I had very few good days. And we're rocking along, and I've been doing this for probably 9, 10 years, 8, 9, 10 years. And, hopelessness, when we lose hope, we lose the will to live because, it's a slippery slope. And I had worked, I had tried, I had done everything in my ability to change things. I had went to the doctors. I had done what I knew to do. At that time, I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. And when Jesus was mentioned, I really didn't want any part of it. But God had a plan. I had a praying mom, had other people that were praying for me. And during this time when all this was going on, a lot of people didn't know what was going on in my life. There's going to be people listening to this that knew me back then that had no idea. They probably knew something was wrong, but they had no idea what the situation, how deep it was, and the depth of what was going on. But I continued with to take the medication, lithium. And the thing is when you're taking lithium, they tell you, you can't get dehydrated. You have to watch sunlight, because if you get dehydrated, don't drink enough water, you can have a cardiac arrest. Well, I was just to the point in my life where I really didn't care. I was I had done everything I knew to do. I had a young lady that I was interested in dating. I asked her out, and she wasn't interested in going out, but she became a good friend of mine. And she started talking about Jesus, and I didn't want to hear about Jesus. I didn't want any part of Jesus, but I enjoyed being around her. And at that time, she was someone that, she was a godsend. She was someone that was able that I could talk to, I could share with, and she didn't just get in the pit with me and roll around or stuff, but she listened to me, and such a blessing in my life at that time. But I started going to church with her, and I accepted, Jesus back into my life, and started going to church, and started really with a relationship with God. And God will use things around us that to draw us to Him. But in that time, I had a choice. But after I accepted Jesus in my life, things didn't get better. And that may be hard for people to believe, but the spiral was even more, because at the time, Satan had my life. And when I accepted Jesus, he no longer had me. So he wanted to take me out. So the things increased. The pressure increased. I was suicidal all the time. One of the things that kept me is because I had hope that things could change. But I loved my mom and dad, and I knew I had people that loved me, and I knew they loved me, and I had family members that loved me. And I knew that if I took my life, and if I took this way out, that it would hurt them so badly. Because they had been in this fight with me for a long time too. Like I said, I lived at home. During this time, and I didn't talk about, I was in college. My brother in high school, we fought a lot. My brother and I fought, and brothers and I fought other people. I had a pretty major anger issue. I would go into rages and get into fights, and after the fight or whatever, people would have to tell me what happened, because I would just blank out, because I would get so angry, get taken over with rage. And so I was a very angry person. When we're you're 20 years old and you're in your 20s, and you think that you know a whole lot more than what you probably really know. I was very prideful. Um, that caused me and my dad to clash over things, and I was so much of the problem back then. I was so much of a problem. But see, I blamed everybody else for my problems. I blame my mom and dad for how they had raised me. And mom and dad did the best they can. Did they make mistakes? Absolutely, they made mistakes. But they were good parents to me. And was eat up with bitterness, resentment in my life. I had envy because I looked at other people and I compared myself constantly, and it just made things worse in my life. Made things a whole lot worse. There was, I was tied into pornography and things like that, because you're just looking for coping mechanisms when you're struggling that bad. You're using alcohol. I never used drugs or anything like that, but alcohol didn't even work for me. I mean, it just, nothing fixed it. But I got where I had very few good days. When holidays would come around, I'd just tell mom and dad, y'all go on. I'm just going to stay home. I'm just going to stay home. This is what I need to do. And I just didn't feel like I could put a smiling face on for other people and try to act like nothing was wrong. I just didn't have the energy to do it anymore. I was coming to the end of myself. And how many of you know that are listening that God will have you come to the end of yourself? There was so much pride of me doing things the way I wanted to do it. Because mom would say, Todd, do you really think it's depression? I'd say, Mom, it is. Because I've been clinically diagnosed. And every time I was diagnosed clinically with depression or bipolar, I took on that identity. And guess what happened to me? I got worse. I'm thankful for the medications. I'm thankful for that was where I was, and that's what I needed at the time. It helped me get through. But it wasn't the answer for me. And I think that for even people that are listening today that are seeing some help from medications, it's not the answer. But at the same time, you need to be on those medications. I had to get better in order for to get off of those things. And I would never say go off medication or anything like that. But, things just kept sliding, and mom and dad realized how bad it was because, they got the shotguns, that I was suicidal, and they took shotguns. But here's the thing. If a person wants to take their life, them taking the shotguns wasn't going to keep me from doing that. I mean, it wasn't. Only thing that probably could have helped me is if they would have put me in a mental institution, and that's probably where I needed to go. And if things hadn't changed in my life, I would have either taken my life or I would have been in a mental institution, because that's just where I would have had to be. Because it was very difficult on mom and dad. Me being in that home, I was just up and down and flying to rages, and it was just it wasn't a good time. And then also you start taking on the identity that there's good seeds and there's bad seeds, and this is absolutely a lie from the enemy. But there's good people and there's bad people, and I was just one of the bad people. I was one of the ones who got what was left. I got what was left over, and that's what God gave me. So that paints a picture of God, in a terrible way. So there's just no hopelessness. And the enemy is sitting there whispering in my ear, it's better. It's better. Things will be better if you take your life. And I just got to the point where I didn't know what to do. My counselor told me, she says, Todd, there's nothing I can do for you. There's nothing we can do for you. You're just going to have to go find somewhere else or someone else. I can't help you. We can't help you. I begged her to go back, to take me back, that I would try harder. It would be different this time. Well, she did for a short time take me back, and I continued to go. And during this time, I was doing all I was supposed to do. I never missed an appointment, but it wasn't helping. It wasn't helping. I wasn't moving forward in my life. And so one day, she told me, she said, Todd, it's not good for my business if you go blow your brains out. And you have to leave. And I walked away from that appointment. I walked away from there realizing I was at the end of my road. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was at the end. And how many of you know that God will have you get to the end of yourself? The bottom is a different place for different people. And, it says we can fall on the rock or the rock will fall on us. And I was finally to the point where I was like, I'm either going to lose my life, I'm going to take my life, I've got to go into a mental institution, or I don't know, I don't know what the or is. I didn't know what other option I had. And in this second video, I'm going to talk about what God has done and what God did in that situation, and what God did in that desperate situation in my life. And so this is the end of the first video, and we'll go into more detail on the second. Thank you.